Welcome everybody to the Real Dealz podcast, one of the top-ranked real estate investing podcasts for the last 7 years. This is the place to be for investing strategies you can actually use, expert interviews, and of course, some good old-fashioned entertainment. Now, here's your host for the show, Elliot, the REI guy, Smith.
What's going on, Real Dealz podcast listeners? I'm coming at you this week with show 368. And we got a cool, interesting, different guest this week. His name's Chris Ryan, and he is now currently the CEO of GoBundance, which is a men's and women's mastermind, separate, but mastermind for people that want to really grow their life and take life big. And they focus on different pillars of life, and then it's not all financial and business. I joined GoBundance back in December from a recommendation from my buddy Brandon Turner. He had been in it for a while and really enjoyed it. And there's different levels, and there's all of these guys that are working on growing businesses, being good dads, being good husbands, worrying about their health, looking about how much they're giving back to their community. And they meet up quite a few times a year. There's different trips. There's all these things you can do. And it's just really a cool group. And it's not a pitch. It's just a talking about what this is. But we're also diving into Chris's life as being an entrepreneur from the time he was a little kid and selling sodas to running for 8 years, the CEO of Tiger 21, which is a ultra high net worth mastermind. He talks about guys that had billionaires in there, and guys, the average wealth was probably around 85 million. So he talks about that, and really we dive into those guys' lives a little bit. And like, now that they've created all their wealth, they've built all their business, and they've hustled. What are their regrets? What are they trying to do now? Or was it worth it? And things like this. And it's really interesting. And Tucker actually got on the show with us, and Tucker and I did this as a co-interview. And I think the cool thing was you could see Tucker's wheels turning, my wheels turning, because we were trying to ask these questions because we're in that grind, build mode. And we got to talk a lot about guys that have done that. Kids are older, kids are grown, and how, like, what sacrifices they had to make to get where they were. And then also, now that they've got there, what are they trying to repair and fix and really focus on now? And so it was really a good show if you're looking for personal growth. I struggle with, a lot of, I get tunnel vision and it's go, and I leave a wake of destruction in my path a lot of times, and really trying to focus on making sure I'm a good husband, I'm a good father, I'm a good friend. Those are the things that are important to me. And they don't take money, but they take money because you need time. And so really, it was an interesting show, and I think you're really going to like it. It's not a ton of real estate content, so if you're just only looking at getting real estate content, then that might not be the best show for you. But if you're looking at how to build a cool life and an impactful and a meaning life, I think it's a really interesting and good show for that. So what's going on with me in my business this week? So currently, I got my 2.5-year-old at the office today. Daycare lady was sick, so he is sitting here watching Daniel Tiger. So that's kind of fun. It's cool that I could bring him. And so I'm helping my wife out so she can get some stuff done. She's working on some cost seg stuff and getting our taxes all lined up and some HELOCs. So she had some stuff that was really pressing to do. So he's sitting here hanging out with me this week. One thing that I have been coming to realize in my business is I'm the guy who wants to do a bajillion different things, and I always wanted to be good at a ton of different things and take on too much. What I've realized since I started this partnership with Cole and Tucker and going into last year was I'm really good at a couple things. I'm really good at sales, I'm really good at negotiation, and I'm really good at connecting with people and building relationships. That's my thing I'm best at. I'm really bad at computer work discipline, anything that has to do with discipline. If you look at my strength finder, my 34 top traits, my top 5 are basically relationships and sales. My bottom 5 are discipline, 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 discipline. So, you hear people talk about working only on what you're good at and hiring out your weaknesses. And so I never really took that to heart so much as I have in the last 8 to 9 months. So as I talk about, you guys here say, we're building a 13 unit, we're buying a 25 unit, we're getting more and more rentals, we're doing flips, I got land development going on, I got the call center going on, I got the podcast going on. And so I have all these things. And if I was trying to do all the stuff, I just could not do it. And so I have completely narrowed my focus in so many ways, where with the land development and buying and selling apartments, my best skill set is getting them under contract, doing the marketing, having the sales funnel come to me, getting them under contract. And then once it's under contract, handing it off to somebody else that can, do all the permits, all that stuff for the development. And I just manage the seller's expectations. And so I'm like, I want to do all these things, but I can't do it all on my own. So what I did is I went and found a partner that is really good at developing and then building houses, but he didn't have a good sales funnel. So I'm like, hey, I will go help build the sales funnel. I will run the sales cycle. I will go raise money. You do everything else. And we'll split it at some point 50-50. With buying the apartments, same thing. I'm going to help build the sales funnel. I'm going to take the calls. My sales team is going to take the calls. I'm going to go raise money, and then I'll manage the sellers. And then my wife's going to handle all the rentals. I don't know anything about our tenants anymore. She has taken all the rentals off our plate. So as you guys know, we manage 41 doors. We own some of them in partnership, so we don't own all 41 ourselves. The 25 unit, we're buying it. We're going to be 50-50 on that. So, but she manages it. I don't even know if she's evicting tenants or tenants are paying the rent or these things. She just doesn't bug me with it. She just handles that side of the business. With the call center, I just handle the sales and client management. And then I also communicate what that needs to happen to the call center. But all the nitty gritty, building the easy button leads out, doing all the skip tracing, doing all of these things, that's all pushed out to somebody else. And so the podcast, same deal. I go get the guests, I do the podcast, I hire somebody to edit the podcast. Somebody runs my Instagram for me. I don't post any of this stuff to my Instagram. I approve it and help kind of guide the path a little bit, but somebody else does all those things. So really, guys, the one thing if I can take away this week is really sit down, and I would actually highly recommend using, and there's no affiliate money here, Gallup Strength Finder, and going and taking the Gallup Strength Finder test. I think it's like $50 for a 34 assessment of like your top 34 traits, and go figure out what you're best at, and then figure out how to find somebody or that can be good at the opposite things of you. And then you go at it and just focus on what you're really good at. So if you're really good at operations and system building, go find somebody like me who's really good at sales. If you're really good at sales, go find somebody that's the opposite of me that's really good at operations and systems building. You'll go farther and you'll do way more with somebody like that than you will if you're just trying to do it all yourself, because you're going to get bogged down in these things that you're not good at, you don't like. You're going to not be as fast and efficient. You're going to push it off. You're going to procrastinate because your body and your mind just doesn't like doing it. So that would be the one main tip I could have, is because I have so much good things going on right now. And it was when I really focused on only doing what I was good at and finding guys or girls that are really good at the other things that I suck at. So really good book on that you're reading that helped set up that business and set up that structure is Traction as well. I mentioned it on my Instagram this week, but it really talks about, are you a visionary or are you an integrator? I'm a visionary. Tucker is more of an integrator. Tucker can actually be both sides. Tucker's that unicorn in this world. My wife, she's the integrator. And so find somebody that's the yin to your yang on that. So anyway, guys, I think you're really going to enjoy this show. I know I did. My wheels were turning. I didn't even know what questions to ask because I was thinking about my life and all these things that I can do better and how do I grow? How do I win in every aspect of life, not just in business and buying and selling properties. So one other thing to look at this week, looks like Biden's pushing out some massive tax plan changes so they can pay for their $11 trillion that they want to spend. So just know, if you're getting worked up, like saying, oh, they're going to kill the 1031, they're going to raise capital gains taxes, they're going to change this, and all these things are going to change. Just know things always change. And the one thought that I had this week when I was sitting there thinking about this was, if things were to stay the same, tax structure, all these things, whatever, and it was the same rules since forever, right? If it was exact same rules, there wouldn't be any opportunities for people to jump in, because people would have figured it out way before you, and it would just crush everybody. When they do these changes, you got to look at it as an opportunity, because there's going to be opportunities, because things are changing. People are going to, buying patterns are going to be different. What kind of assets they're going to buy is going to be different. How they're going to hold their assets is going to be different. All these things matter. And so when there's change, it opens up opportunity for you to adapt and be faster, better, stronger than somebody else, because everybody's got to change with you. So really look at this. I'll take the 1031 thing, for example. Our thought is, especially because we're going into apartments, and the idea was to trade, and then we die, right? That's the idea. Well, if that goes away and we're buying these apartments, well, now all of a sudden, should we build apartments because we're going to hold them longer? Should we build apartments knowing that maybe we condoize them because they will allow up to $500,000 in capital gains? And then so we build these, we hold them, and we're ready to sell them. We condoize them and sell them, and each unit then has $500,000 gain that we can then 1031 exchange each one individually. So do you do build to rent, where you're building out subdivisions of single families or duplexes like they're doing in the Midwest and Texas? There's always going to be opportunity, as long as you don't focus on all the negatives. So look at this as a positive, that things are changing, and that's going to help allow you to change with it. All right, guys, have a great day. Go get after it this week, and have a wonderful weekend. We're hitting into May, so year's almost halfway over, guys. Let's get it. If you haven't been doing anything, and you've been saying, I want to get in, the time is now. The time is always right now. Don't dwell on you not doing it. Just go get after it today. All right, guys, have a wonderful day.
All right, Real Dealz podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Ironbridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Ironbridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Ironbridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Ironbridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did. All right, everybody out there in listener land, I'm going to welcome myself back to the show. Elliot got me out of quasi-retirement today. We've got an amazing guest, which is one of the reasons why I'm here. He's got a lot of really, really good information to share with what he's got going on, his life experience, his business experience. And that's part of the reason why I'm back, because I like to talk to people about business. I've talked about real estate for the last 8 years. And to be honest, you can only talk about it so much. And I think 8 years is enough, at least for now anyway. But if we're going to talk business, I wanted to come back on the microphone. And so, Elliot, first and foremost, thanks for having me back on the show. I appreciate you sharing the mic with me.
Yeah, thanks, Godfather.
I don't know about that, but I'm back, and we'll see how I do today. A little out of practice, but I think I'll pick up where I left off. So without further ado, I want to intro our guest. It's a gentleman that actually was connected to us by Elliot, which it's connected a lot of people to us. So I got to give you props for being a hell of a connector, Elliot. But he also runs one of the other groups that Elliot's a part of, which is GoBundance. So without further ado, Mr. Chris Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, first and foremost, I want to say thank you and let you know that I'm grateful. As I mentioned to Elliot before we began, I've watched a number of your podcasts. The energy level, the depth of the questioning, the humor that you bring to this is really strong, and I'm grateful to be on the show.
Awesome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are? I mean, you were telling us a little bit, we know a lot about you, but it's a lot for us to unpack. Why don't you give us a quick synopsis of who you are, what life has looked like in a brief 30-second synopsis to start?
I'm a middle-class kid who grew up in New York, who was blessed by a ton of folks that saw something in him that maybe he didn't see in himself. I started my first company when I was 17, have built a bunch of businesses over the years, have run a bunch of really good organizations, including most recently GoBundance. I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a brother. I became an ordained reverend last summer, and I find myself getting into all kinds of wonderful life experiences in the context of both my work and my personal life, some of which I hope we unpack over the course of the next hour and a half.
Cool.
I'm curious because in our intro to this show, in our chatting, there's some things you said that my life kind of has had some of those same things. One of which is you said you started your first company at 17. I started one at 18. Obviously, it wasn't a success. I didn't sell out and make a bunch of money. I just lost money. But I'm curious, that first company, because most entrepreneurs have one that's a little bit more elevated than I was selling candy on the playground. But what was that, just out of curiosity?
So we talked about the importance of going deep. So let me start out off the high dive. So when I started college at the ripe old age of 17, and my father sat me down on the dorm room twin cot bed and said, "I'm proud of you. You'll be 18 in a month. And on your 18th birthday, I'm cutting you off financially. And so you can go to college, you cannot go to college, you can get a job, you cannot get a job. The only thing you can't do is you can't come home." And so at the ripe old age of, it was August of 1985, I became financially independent, meaning I had to fend for myself. And other than the first semester of college and about $300 in a old savings account, I didn't have two nickels to rub together. And so I started my first business, not out of some grandiose entrepreneur vision, but I started out of the abject fear of not having a place to go to school, much less having a shelter over my head, much less not having what was then top ramen noodles to eat every day.
Did you have a good relationship with your dad?
So that put a damper on it. I got to be honest, right, as you would expect. Long and short of it is I came from a pretty troublesome home life, in so much as my father had a drinking problem. And when he would get angry, he'd, come after his firstborn. I also had a strong personality like my father did. So we were very much alike, and kind of like two North Poles, they repelled. And so I was sent off to military school when I was 13, graduated top of my class, expected to get a full ride scholarship. So my parents didn't have to pay for college. Playing tennis down at the University of Texas at Austin. That didn't happen. And like I said, my dad told me that I had one semester to figure it out. And then I was financially on my own for the rest of my life. So the answer is not at that given point in time, Elliot. Subsequent, we made up. He passed in 2008. We were on really good terms when he died.
Awesome. So
we did go off the deep end. Yeah. Which in a good way.
Yeah.
But I'm curious then, because it sounds like that conversation, although at the time was probably one that, kids don't like to hear. It's kind of like, "Hey, mom, dad, can I get a new car?" And they're like, "No, you can't get a new car. You don't like it, but you understand later in life why that's the right answer. What was, because of that conversation, what was that business that you decided that you wanted to start in order to help support yourself and kind of propel yourself forward?
Yeah. So, and Tucker, you're hitting on something that I absolutely believe in so much as I think some of the toughest challenges, some of the biggest obstacles that we've had in our life are both tipping points for our success and also outstanding learning opportunities. So, I grew up as a tennis player, nationally ranked. Thought that between the summer of high school and the beginning of college, I'd go on the tour, make some money there. I got my ass kicked repeatedly, decided that wasn't a play, but I had played enough with enough quality players that for sure I'd come down to UT, make the UT tennis team, get a full ride scholarship there, and wouldn't need a dime or a penny from my folks. That didn't happen either, which is what precipitated the conversation I just mentioned to you. But I was a really good tennis player, and I knew how to teach tennis from spending part of the summer at a place called Nick Bolteri's Tennis Academy, which was the mecca for all world-class tennis players. And so I started my first company at 17 called Tennis Unlimited. At first, it was just myself. By the time I finished college, I had 8 people working for me. I actually took a pretty substantial pay cut when I left my own business to start my very small stint in corporate America. And, I was pulling down $3,000-$4,000 a month as a 19, 20, 21-year-old, back in the mid to late 80s. So I did that truly out of necessity. But the gift of that was that I caught my entrepreneurial bug early. I knew that I liked to be productive. I knew I would work harder than anybody else. I knew that I enjoyed making money, and I liked the freedom and the choices that I got from running my own businesses. And so that was a good piece of my education, Tucker, in college, as you suspected. And it also has served me really well in life as I've had, a dozen or so other businesses since then.
Do you feel like, because I've asked myself this question a lot, do you feel like you've always been wired as an entrepreneur, or do you think it grew with time? Like, can you remember back when you were in high school and, some people think I got to go to college, get a job. They want to be this, they want to be that. And other people, I think myself, obviously, we just kind of marched to a little bit different drummer. We can't put our finger on it back then, but I know I felt that way. Did you feel that way in high school, or do you think that tipping point with your dad was what kind of pushed you in that direction?
No, it was a growing pull on me since as long as I can remember. So my first hustle was selling soda outside of the public tennis courts at the local high school where I grew up. And I was 6, 7 years old. My brother was 5. And I realized that I put my 5-year-old brother in front of the gate where the people would have to come in and out to go to the tennis courts. They would stop, mostly to see if he was lost or he needed help. But inevitably, I could pivot and sell him a 25 cents Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, or whatever, right? Total hustle. And so the first full day that we did it, my brother and I, we probably had, a few cases of soda pop that my dad was kind enough to buy us. And his expectation, of course, that we wouldn't have a single one of them sold, right? Because we just sit there and be quiet. Meanwhile, Scott knew that if he stood in front and gave people puppy dog eyes, they would inevitably look at him and stop. We sold out everything. I mean, this was the days before there was bottled water. Had there been bottled water, we would have sold that. And my only regret is I'm figuring I could have gotten $5 had I sold my brother, but I didn't do that. And so long and short of it, my dad comes back. He's like, "Where'd all the soda go? We sold it." He's like, "Bullshit." I go, "No, we did." And I showed him literally like $8, $9, $10 worth of quarters. And so that was it at about 6, maybe 7. And it just kind of grew since then, Tucker. So I think it's both. You have a natural kind of leaning towards it, but then you also have the opportunity and the exposure to experience it, embrace it. And then, like a good 12-step program that I never quit, I got hooked.
Now, is your brother an entrepreneur too now?
He's a super entrepreneur. Absolutely. He's also one of the GoBundance champion members as well.
Gotcha. That's my goal. I need to be a champion member next year, Tucker. So we better work hard on Call Magic.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Yeah,
We'll
net worth has to just grow a few dollars to get up in that. So
yeah. I mean, I think you're right, and that's why I asked the question. I think there's definitely something within, and I ultimately think it goes deeper, because then I hear a lot of questions, and I don't want to jump around too much, but I think this is an important thing for entrepreneurs, because this show is going to be mainly about business and entrepreneurship. But there's always the inevitable question that people are asked when they're asked about their success and why they do what they do. And my personal thought is, if somebody has a why that's different than themselves, I never really understood that. Like, you can want to provide for your family and your significant other and your children and things like that. But I always felt like the most super entrepreneurs, their why is them. It's that internal kind of North Star that drives them. And I feel like if that's not you, you're not really an entrepreneur. You're just doing what you feel like you need to do to take care of other people. And I don't know, do you think that's true, or do you think I'm just kind of an asshole for thinking?
No. So here's how I would reframe that. I think all of us have a natural set of skills and proclivities in terms of talents and interest. I also think that we're a product of being nurtured and driven towards a particular realm of world, athletics, professions, whatever the case may be. So I think it's an interesting blend of both nature and nurture. And to your point, Tucker, the only people that we can be and be well are ourselves. And so based on how we're raised, based on the experiences and the opportunities and the challenges and the obstacles and the successes and the failures that we have, we're put down a path that's us. And ultimately, we can only be the best we that we can be. The challenge is, are you getting the right exposure, especially as I have a 19-year-old daughter, especially as we raise children, are we giving them the right exposure to give them, hopefully, as much choice as possible? Because as entrepreneurs, it's easy to say, I want my daughter to be another entrepreneur. Of course I do. That's not necessarily where her calling lies. And if she doesn't want to be that, who am I to jack her reality at the ripe old age of 19? Rather, what I want to do is I want to encourage her to be the best daughter, performer, she's a singer, that she can be, and let her have as much choice to take whatever path she has in store for herself as she can. And so to answer your question, I think it's a combination of nature and nurture. And I think what's most important is that as we have kids, as they develop interests and talents, we do whatever we can to support them.
I want to hop in here real quick, Tucker, because
you remember that conversation we had at the table in Bend? He touched on it, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was adopted. Sorry, we got a little construction going here, but I was adopted. And so I have my birth mom comes over once a month and hangs out watches our 2-year-old. And my dad was a physician, MD, owned a practice of 60 people, big practice, ended up going down and just roller coaster, right? And so he would always talk to me on the way going skiing or doing all the things that he wanted to do, the fun things, which is another learning lesson in itself, but about real estate or entrepreneurship or building a business and money and finances. And never once did he ever say I had to go to college. He always said I'd be really good with people, something I need to do something with people. And so he fostered that, and he showed me these flipping houses. We flipped a house at 18 and all these things, and they didn't really stick right away. But I always think when my birth mom's here, who would I be if I was raised by her? One, I'm very happy who I was raised by, but I always wonder that question, because there's so much that I have that are like just Elliot's, natural, my blood, what's in my blood. But then there's also things I learned from my dad, like a lot of things. So it's just a very interesting concept of you thinking about who would I be if I was in this environment, because they are polar opposite environments is what I would have been raised in. And it's an interesting concept of that whole thought process.
You know what I find is fascinating? So I recently finished reading a book written by a guy named James Doty. It's called Into the Magic Shop. And this 12-year-old little boy raised on the wrong side of the tracks is definitely destined for a life of crime, drugs, and probably an early grave. Walks into a magic shop, befriends the mother of the owner of the magic shop. And over the course of a few months, she pours into him. The guy became one of the top neurosurgeons in the world. He actually teaches at Stanford, runs the Center for Compassion, founded it at Stanford, and he's the chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation that is responsible for all the donations for the Dalai Lama across the United States. The guy's genius level smart. And his thesis is, if not but for the intervention of this woman in his life, he probably would have been dead 20 years ago. So I think part of it, Elliot, is, are we blessed or cursed with the people that help raise us and that are around us? And are we put into opportunities or challenges that either allow us to exercise our personality and course the direction of our life to our own liking, or not? Because all of us can have a default setting that puts us more or less in the gutter. And it's usually through good parenting, good mentors, good education, good friends, that we develop into ultimately who we are, at least in the context of the three of us talking on the call right now. So, thank God for being raised by people who showed a level of care, provided a level of education, the friends that we've surrounded ourselves with, because it's allowed all three of us to, live a world that for most people is probably beyond blessed.
It's an interesting book. I know, and we'll get into this more as we kind of continue the conversation, but you running kind of a peer-to-peer mastermind group of sorts in GoBundance. I've been running a smaller scale, kind of lesser barrier of entry one for a long time. It's one of the reasons I know Elliot. But there was one individual that Elliot knows well. When I first started the podcast, he reached out to me, and he was kind of at a crossroads of like, I don't know what to do. And so I actually made a segment of the show about him. And I said, well, screw it. I'm going to put it on the show, and I'm going to give him my guidance. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to look like a real ass. And if it does, well, there's proof that you can redirect people's lives from one intervention, right? And that was Danny O'Bannon. And that was 8 years ago. And now, he's doing amazing things, and he's built
Good for you, brother.
A big real estate investing business. But that's one of many people. So I do, and it's not because I'm that great. It's just because I had what they needed at that moment in time, right? To kind of redirect them, and I gave it to them. And so I think you're right. I think that finding that person or people when you're at a point where you can be redirected, I think that plays a big role in where you eventually land. I think for me personally, talking about how we were raised, and, Elliot had kind of a mix of parents due to his upbringing. Neither of my parents were entrepreneurial at all, which is why I've always asked myself this question, like, how in the hell did I end up with this, DNA or this makeup? And the only entrepreneur in our entire family was my grandfather. And he was an entrepreneur to the extent that he sacrificed all else, right? Which is obviously not a great thing. Like family, relationships, friendships, the dollar was above everything else. And so as much as I learned from him in a positive way, I learned from him in a negative way as well, to see that. But that's the only, I guess, redirector that I had in my life that could have taken me from just a standard, let me go to school, let me try and get a job and figure this out, to I am a lifetime entrepreneur, and I could never go through door number one because it just isn't me.
I get it. And what's, and you get this, everyone's path is different. And the reality is we're probably one or two good or bad decisions away from hitting either side of the bell curve. And, as we get older, hopefully as we get wiser, we're more particular about how we protect ourselves against the nosedives and the landmines, and how we steer ourselves with the education and the experience, the knowledge that we have, more and more into the right direction. And so, it's always a serpentine path. There's no one, one of my most successful friends in life across all dimensions, he was an X-ray tech from Mississippi. He has an 8th grade education. He's worth about 400 million these days. So, it's not the education that you get. It's not the parents that you have. It's no one thing that guarantees you a ticket into success any more than it's one thing that guarantees you a ticket into the gutter. It's somewhere in between. And hopefully with a little bit of self-awareness and a little bit of self-confidence, you can help guide yourself to whatever path that takes.
So Okay. So what kind of businesses, you said you started multiple 12 more businesses. What businesses? And then I know you didn't start GoBundance, but I'm guessing you came on to help grow it or whatever. But what kind of businesses has there been a common theme of the businesses? Are they all different? Or maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. As I said, I started the Tennis Unlimited to put myself through college. Got out of college, came to in Austin, University of Texas, came to Dallas, both to start my first job and also go to graduate school. I spent about a year in graduate school and I'm like, this sucks. I want to go earn money. And so I started in 1991, 1992, a technology company, and probably more lucky than anything else. But I rode the wave of what were then the big migrations off of what were mainframe and midframe computers onto this new world called local area networks. Built that company up, built a support company up, built a desktop management company up, built a project management company up, built a technical recruiting company up, and rode this wave through from the 90s through the turn of the century, and wound up having one of the businesses fail, shut it down. Most of the other businesses cobbled together and wound up selling. And so I sold my last technology company May of 2000. When
did the technology crash? When did the tech
right after that?
Was your timing really good?
So yeah, dude, I'm so, it's not smarts, it's just luck, right? So my valuation of the major company that I sold was December 1999 valuation, right? It couldn't have been hotter and at a better time. And I also sold to people that I knew, that I trusted, that I liked, and that I had relationships with that literally went back 8 to 10 years. So when the technology bubble cratered, they kept everything more or less going and just waited it out. They finally sold in 2010. I had a nice 7-figure exit on that. Nothing to set me up for life, but that could have gone 10,000 ways differently, up to and including me going through personal bankruptcy. Didn't happen. Walked away with a solid single, maybe a double on that. I did some private and public equity work. I decided to spend about a year and a half helping some charities get off the ground, got married, had a child, and then had a few businesses of friends of mine that I had going. And then in 2012, I was having breakfast with a buddy of mine, and he asked me if I would be interested in running this organization called Tiger 21, which was the mastermind group for the ultra high net wealth individuals that I ran in Texas before GoBundance, and not realizing. What was the net worth
level? What was maybe dive into that group a little bit of what that was.
Yeah. So average net worth is somewhere between 75 and 100 million. I had a few billionaires in my group. So if you take those outliers out, it was probably 85 million bucks. Average age was probably 56, 57 years old. Most of the guys were first generation wealth, meaning not a lot of second generation or third generation inheritors. They came from all walks of life. Most of them grew up some form of Midwest culture value set, and from technology to healthcare to real estate to hedge funds, you name it. They had all done exceptionally well. And so I ran that for 8 years. One of the members that joined in the Austin group that I set up was David Osborne, one of the 3 founders of GoBundance. And when I resigned from Tiger 21 in May of 2020, it took David about a whopping 80 minutes from the email announcing my resignation for him to give me a phone call and say, I don't care what you do, but don't do anything before you talk to me.
That sounds like our conversation on the call center, Tucker, when I said, hey, this kid quit and freed up some equity, and all of a sudden about an hour later, that sucks. Hey, let's have a call tomorrow and work on this call center.
Of course.
Well, it goes back to, as you kind of grow along this entrepreneurial journey, I'll go back to the question I had for you in a second. You start to get better at recognizing opportunity, right? Like in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship, everything is like a level 10 opportunity to you because it's all new and it's like what it could be, right? And then as you get a little more seasoned and a little more jaded and you have some success and some failures, you start to recognize the pieces that have to be in play for something to go from idea to success, right? Because everybody's got ideas, and
that's smart.
those people that don't ever actually achieve whatever they, quote unquote success in life, a lot of them are very much kind of like, oh, I had that idea and I thought of that too. And it's like, you can think about anything, but actually making it happen, that's the difficult part. I mean, and I like to consider myself a bit of a creative on the idea side, but I'm better at the implementation of taking the ideas and making them reality. And even better now, because everybody is, I'm not the best by any means, but I'm better than my previous self at curating those ideas and deciding, okay, this is worth putting effort into because I think it can actually be something. And so back to Elliot's point, him and Cole had a really good thing going with the way that the call center was the foundational pieces, but I felt like I could bring something that could really help them tie it all together. And here we are about a year later, and we still like each other, and it's going well. So I think overall, it's been a great journey thus far.
And you bring up a really good point. You have to know yourself, and you have to know your own strengths and weaknesses. And to what you said a second ago, when you're young and you're naive, you can slay every dragon that's thrown in front of you, which is total bullshit. The reality is you can't. The reality is you don't know your own limitations, your strengths and your weaknesses. And so to your point, everything's a level 10. The trick is it's not only okay to fail, it's necessary to fail. But as you've heard the cliche before, you better fail forward. You better learn, you better internalize, you better grow, and you better not make the same mistake a second time. And if you do that quickly enough, then maybe you have a good enough emotional intelligence and understanding of yourself to go, okay, I can do this really successfully. Keep that shit away from me.
Yeah, that's true. There was one business that I started that I still to this day wish it worked, because it was going to be, in my mind, my path to being some sort of a GM for the NBA. And we had started an ABA franchise here in Portland back when the ABA was pre-NBDL or the D League. And so it was going to be the D League. And so we started a franchise from scratch here in Portland, and we ran it for half a season. And I learned a whole bunch about corporate sponsorship and cash flow on that big of a level and all kinds of things. And we ended up having to sell out virtually all of our ownership to keep it floated to another guy in town who ultimately couldn't keep it floated either. But that was a hell of a journey. And it was one that I would probably still, even though looking at it now, it's like, that was a hell of a mountain to climb. And I really had no idea how big that dragon was that I needed to slay, but I'd probably still tackle that one again, just for my love of what that business is. But there's plenty of others that I look at now and I go, I mean, that was just too big of a mountain to climb based on the skill sets of the people that were involved, capital base that we had, or experience base that we had. So yeah, this journey of entrepreneurship is interesting, how your frame of reference grows in addition to everything else along the way.
Yeah. And as you well know, just holding on to the example you just gave, my guess is there's some major professional lessons that you picked up off of that experience. So yeah, the business may have been a failure, but it may have prepared you to be a better entrepreneur, better business person, better operator in the context of what you're doing these days.
Yeah, without question. I mean, there's, the old saying, which is you either learn or you earn, right? So I hope when you learn, it was worth what you lost. In that case, I think that it definitely was, no question. But yeah, entrepreneurship is it's a trip. But,
so when you say, Chris, Tucker is the implementer. He's really, really smart marketer, but really a good implementer and getting things and putting the right pieces. I'm a terrible implementer. I'm all gas, no brakes, as he likes to call it. I'm just an idea run through brick walls. And so I'm more of the vision. I have more of a vision side. What are you like? What is your strongest skill set that you've built and honed over the years? And maybe talk about how that's evolved through your career since your tennis days of what,
Yeah. So I've been everything from the janitor to the CEO of the organizations that I've run. My natural predisposition leans more towards relationships, partnerships, selling, rainmaking. And I learned a long time ago, you can buy a lot of forgiveness if you're bringing revenue in the door, right? So I could make a lot of operational mistakes, back office mistakes, but I had so much money coming in the front door. People were patient and forgiving. As I've gotten older, I realized three things. The first one is my natural demeanor leans more towards being the visionary, more towards being the creator of the organizations that I'm involved with. now. However, with a number of the projects I'm working on, not only GoBundance, but others, I find that I play and implement a role across a very narrow set of activities that typically involve customer, client, investor-facing activities. I also create experiences and opportunities. Tucker, I like the word you used earlier today in terms of curating activities. So I curate experiences for the ultra high net wealth crowd. And then thirdly, I really find fulfillment and satiation and satisfaction in my life in helping other people achieve the highest level of themselves. So it's a lot of focus, not so much on success, because the crowd that I have been dealing with for the last decade, all uber successful, but really more focusing on finding and helping build significance in the lives of the people that I surround myself with. And in Tiger 21, again, man, fear is a great motivator. When I rolled in there at the ripe old age of about 43, 44, I was the youngest guy in the room. I was the least successful financially. I sold a few businesses, made a few shekels. These guys were all, Elliot, as I mentioned a second ago, in the 50, 75, 100. We had one guy who was worth almost 4 billion. Who was in the group. And so if I focus just around the financial skill set, I'm screwed because I'm the idiot in the room, right? I'm the tear down in the cul-de-sac that everyone's looking at as an eyesore, right? Got to sell that piece of property, raise that building, and put something else on it and flip it. And so I realized that if I focused on simply the dollars and the cents, I'd screw myself. So I didn't. I pivoted. And I decided to talk to these folks about what would be most significant in moving the needle in their life. And it came down to some stuff that you guys would expect. It's relationships, it's health, it's philanthropy, a sense of giving back. It's building a legacy with respect to their families, with respect to institutions that they're involved with. That's the stuff that really moved the needle. Because, with the folks that were 9 and 10 figures that I dealt with, me putting another $1 million in their bank account doesn't really do much. In one particular instance, there was a billionaire who had a very tough relationship with his son. And had I been able to help him repair his relationship with his son, that would have been everything. And the big learning that I got and where I really am excited about my journey with GoBundance is in the context of the work I did with Tiger 21, all of these people had made their money at a cost. And it's not a financial cost, it's some other cost. It's a relationship, it's health, it's one of the what I call softer forms of capital. And ultimately, they all wanted to repair whatever that cost was or rectify whatever that challenge was. And if I could help them work on that in their 50s and 60s and 70s, then that would be time and effort and energy and money well spent. The gift that I have, Elliot, with GoBundance is, as you well know, the average age of one of our GoBundance members, late 30s, early 40s. So the gift is, this group hasn't had some of the landmines, some of the nose falls, some of the ditch dives that these other folks have had. And the culture and the character and the ethos of what GoBundance focuses on it's the 6 pillars. So it's not just about investment. You better get your act together when it comes to relationships. You better get your act together when it comes to your health. You better have fierce accountability with a group of folks that you can confide in and share with, and they can do the same for you. And you better not only be working on bettering yourself, you better help the guys around you better themselves as well. Otherwise, what are you doing? And the big beneficiaries to that oftentimes are not us in the moment. The big beneficiaries of that are our spouses, our kids, our extended families, our friends, our communities, the people that at the end of our days we're going to care about, because when we leave this world, boys, none of us are taking a New York nickel with us. So we might as well live life to the fullest while we're here and not die with a big bank account and a lot of regrets.
I have one follow-up question. Those guys in Tiger 21 that they want to repair this stuff, would you think that they would say that it was worth it? You think, or they think they would have chose a different path?
It depends on who you ask.
Let's say the synopsis, maybe like more or not more so or less so than the median.
So I'll answer it a few ways. So generally speaking, they would say it's worth it. Now, having said that, right, and I'm making this up, but the guy who's on marriage number 7, candidly, buddy, it's not her. She's not the problem in this conversation, right? And I say that shit funny, tongue in cheek, but here's the answer of it. There are casualties to this. There are relationships that are in the gutter. There are guys that are on their 3rd or 4th wife. And to speak to their 1st, 2nd, and 3rd wife, they would say, no, it's absolutely not worth it. I promise you, there's one guy I can think of in particular that if he could have had a relationship with his child before the child died, he would give up every penny he ever earned in his entire life to make that happen. So it's easy, Elliot, to just give a general answer to that. But, you think about your life, and Tucker, you think about your life. There are certain things, there's not enough money on this planet to sway me from the relationship that I want with my child or the relationship that I want with my brothers. So we all have a cost. We all have a dollar figure in our mind. I hope that all of us have a character set that there are certain things that just can't be bought.
It's interesting how, because I didn't know this going into our conversation today, but the path from Tiger 21 to GoBundance was kind of like the ghost of Christmas future coming back to teach the people in GoBundance.
That is really, Tucker, I like your insightfulness, man. You're a thinker and you process. When I say something, when we're having this conversation, I can almost see your gears turning inside your head as you process through what I've said and then come back. So you're spot on. And the Tiger 21 was the Christmas Ghost of the future. GoBundance is the Christmas Ghost of the past, but with the knowledge of what's going to go down. And here's the great news. GoBundance had this figured out long before I walked in the door. The gift and the joy and the privilege that I have is now having been and doing mixing metaphors, doing my residency and my fellowship with Tiger 21. Now I can look into GoBundance and go, hold on a second, guys. We got to do this, because I've seen how this goes down. And so it gives me an interesting context by which hopefully I can help steer for the time that I'm lucky enough to be the CEO of GoBundance. I can steer this organization in a way that ultimately not only provides value for the GoBundance men, of which there are about 420 now, the GoBundance women, of which there are about 60. But if I do my job right and GoBundance does its job right, not only do we pour into our members, but through them, we affect the spouses and we affect the children and the legacy of the families that we're involved with. That to me is a higher calling than just doing a mastermind among men or women.
Yeah, probably when I first joined this last year in December, I got this thing on my calendar and it was like Saturday morning at 9. It was like family day. And so I'm like, Chrissy, let's just see what this is. And it was this guy singing goofy songs with the families. It was Fam Bunnish.
Brother James.
Yeah,
I know exactly who it was.
Yeah, singing goofy songs, running around, walking around the house, trying to find stuff. And Monty's still 2.5. So he was 2 at the time. He didn't really understand it. And I'm like, I don't know if this is what I signed up. Like, I'm like, this is cool. But I'm like, what's going on here? It was just like, it was so fun. And it's because it's so hard, especially, and you probably seen, Chris, you got older kids, and Tucker is a little bit older than me. I'm in this growth mode right now where I have a lot of things going on. I'm the one that says yes to a lot of things.
Sure.
And I have a 2-year-old that I'll have my phone out and he hits my phone and says phone down. Or I come home, early in the morning every, a couple times a week, and I do an hour with him in the morning, like try to be intentional, but I'll accidentally get on my phone. Another day, he's like, yeah, we were at the park. He's like, go home. And I'm like, we just got here. He's like, no, I want to go home. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, was it because I was on my phone? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, it's like, he's 2.5. And I'm like, shoot. And so seeing that, I think is going to be so impactful of like, how do I be better? Because I can't turn it off a lot of the times. And so it's cool. and this isn't a pitch fest for GoBundance by any means. This is for you, but it's cool to see other gentlemen do that and ask questions to guys that have done those things, because that's what's important. Like, I don't want to leave a trail of destruction behind me on my path to wherever I'm going.
Yeah. And Elliot, let's give yourself a little bit of credit, right? So all of us do what you just talked about doing it. I'm guilty of it. I promise you, Tucker's guilty of it. We've all done this stuff. And it's not that we're nefarious. It's not that we're evil. It's just the reality of the world in which we live in. So part of the GoBundance value proposition to anybody is we lovingly give you a kick on the side of the head and says, hey man, you got a problem. You got an addiction with your phone right now. I'm just making this up. You got a problem with your phone. Let me hold you accountable, Elliot. And when you go home at night, starting at dinner time till your 2.5-year-old goes to bed, the phone's in the other room. It from 5 o'clock to 8:30. The phone's in the other room. Well, can you do that? Yeah, I commit to doing that. Fantastic. A month from now, we'll sit in a meeting again, and I'll ask you, how did that go? It went great, Chris. Never looked at the phone. My relationship with my kids getting better. Or, nah, I couldn't do it. At the end of the day, the only person you're responsible and accountable to is yourself, brother.
Yeah.
And the question is, are there people around you that hold your ass to the fire when you want to do something, but for whatever reason, don't do it? Because we all do the same stuff.
Plus, you only got one kid right now. Wait till you add a second one on there. Then life gets to be a real shit show.
Tucker, how old are your children, if you don't mind me asking?
They're 5 and 4.
And he's got a terrorist. This 4-year-old's a terrorist that wants to kill himself all the time on anything with wheels or a motor.
So this is a funny story. I'll say it quickly. But first time Elliot came over to my house, we had a Call Magic kind of powwow with me. And, he's comes over, sees the house. We're sitting out back by the pool. We've, played a little basketball for ownership, kind of a funny little joke. But then he looks at me, he goes, do you guys like parent your son? And it's like, what do you mean? He's like, like boundaries and punishment and stuff. I was like, you think we don't parent him? You just, we don't care how he acts. And I was like, oh, Elliot, you just don't get it, do you? You don't get it. And he's since learned, probably from many conversations with me, but kids kind of come as they are. And at a certain point, they start to become a little more tame. But you can get, you get a kid that's a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, very manageable. If you have that 5 as your first kid, you're likely to have a 10 as your second kid.
Of course.
Yeah.
Then you understand maybe they are decent parents. They just got blessed with a 10, and that's just what it is. And so my son is a 10.
Here's what I learned, right? So if I can positively affect, and I'll speak to Tiger 21 because I did this. If I can positively affect the Tiger 21 member, that's great. If I can do something that can improve the relationship with the spouse or positively affect the spouse, candidly, that's better. And then the MasterCard moment, guys, is if I do something that moves the needle with the kids. A lot of these people with their insane wealth have a huge concern over raising kids with too much privilege. And so one of the programs that I instituted that your kids, Tucker, your kids, maybe Elliot, your child is too young, is I did a program called Family Philanthropy Day, where I would bring in charities that you would know: Big Brothers Big Sisters, Susan G. Komen, American Heart Association. And we would have kids from about 5 to 12, 13 to college age, and then the adults all in different rooms. And one of the best ways that you can help children learn about money is through philanthropy. And what we would do is we would set up these programs where in about 20-minute blocks, these small kids would get a chance to have experiences with these different charities. ASPCA, you're petting puppies. American Red Cross, you're building exit plans if your house cats is on fire. We brought in Perot Museum, we're making dinosaur toothpaste. And then after these programs, these kids went through, the kids would get like $100 in Monopoly money, and the parents and the kids would decide on what charities they would invest in. And then the kids would have to spend time with these charities in addition to the money. Cutting a check doesn't mean anything to a child. They don't know anything. They could care less. It's esoteric. Having a child spend time with Susan G. Komen, American Heart, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Science Museum, wherever, that's meaningful. And what's interesting is I want with GoBundance the opportunity for us to create experiences and education points to not only engage the members, but their spouses and their kids. So Elliot, it was brother James who was singing the songs, doing all the crazy shit that you talked about a little while ago. If that caused your child to want to go on a call like that again, if he's asking your wife or you about the guy playing the guitar, if it creates a dialogue, buddy, I put that in the win column.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bring up a great point though, Chris. Raising kids, and I did a podcast episode about this long ago, because when you start to cross a certain threshold of success, you kind of level up your lifestyle, right? And I don't know what made me how I am, but I can say that I grew up in a little 850 square foot house in between a crack house and a transformer station. And I shared the living room as my bedroom with my dad's homeless friend till I was 5 years old. Right now, none of that means anything, because when you're a kid, normal is whatever normal is. Right. So there's no like lasting effects of that other than it sounds crazy in a story. Right. But what does leave lasting effects is right now my kids grow up, my house is like fucking Wally World, right? It's ridiculous. It's, and I've worked hard and it's paid for. It's not leveraged. It's completely paid for. And, we've got a pool, we've got an indoor basketball court. It's like, 6,000 plus square feet. It's almost on an acre. It's right in the middle of downtown Lake Oswego. Like, it's like the ultimate dream home. But on the flip side, I'm raising two small children in this house, and I don't want them growing up in this house to rob them of their future selves, their future accomplishments. Elliot and I were having a conversation when we were sitting at our kind of Ben mastermind with a bunch of really successful people that I look up to as well. And one guy that he brought there that owns a bunch of car dealerships, and he's a great guy. And we were talking about, he had gotten his daughter a new car, and she's a great kid and all that. And I don't disagree that he did that, but I said, I will never buy my kids a new car because I don't want to rob from them that feeling of accomplishment later in life. I don't want to steal that from them now that they could get later. So I guess my point is as you have kids and as you get more successful, it really is a point of concern, at least for me. Am I setting my kids up for failure by letting them grow up in Wally World right now and seeing all these things that are normal? And I don't know. What's been your experience with the guys that you've talked to?
Yeah. So I've spent a ton of time thinking about this, specifically to the comments that you made, Tucker. There are two books that I cannot recommend highly enough. The first book is called The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. And it's all about making sure that your children have enough challenge, adversity, obstacles in their life to overcome, that they can develop self-confidence, resilience, perseverance, and a lot of character and skill sets that you want them to have, whether you're here or not, whether you're a billionaire or not. So that's The Blessings of a Skinned Knee. The second book is called The Price of Privilege, and it's all about how not to retard your children by giving them too much and allowing them not to develop as independent, self-sufficient young adults. And so those two books were given out pretty consistently to the parents of kids under the age of about 20 as a kind of a roadmap. Having said that, there's a lot of discussion on how much you should leave your children. So, Warren Buffett, $5 to $10 million a piece. Same thing with Bill Gates. I had a few folks in Tiger 21 that, with the exception of maybe the house and the cars, the kids had no clue of how much their children are worth. I have one woman out of Austin, Texas. She's worth about 400 million, and her two children probably think she's worth about 50 million. And that's fine for her. And she'll decide whenever she wants as to what she shares with them. The other thing is, with a number of folks, they've set up dynastic trusts, education trusts, income trusts, where, providing education for your kids, providing education for your grandchildren and your great grandchildren, and so on and so on. That's all taken care of. Healthcare is taken care of. One of my friends has a income trust that matches the income of his kids. So if his daughter wants to be an artist and makes $30,000 a year, she's making $60,000 a year because the trust matches that. If his son turns out to be a lawyer and makes $1 million a year, he's making $2 million a year. So a lot of what was done was set up to provide boundaries around monies, because as both of you know, we had a Northwestern Mutual guy come in and he talked about the Mayan pyramid of wealth. First generation makes it, second generation pushes it, third generation blows it. And candidly, guys, that's about 85-90% of all of the family wealth. And it's the people who plan, that first generation who plans for succession, and successive generations beyond them, that actually keep something in the coffers for the grandkids, great-grandkids, and so on.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, the trust that match earnings. See, my biggest thing is I started from zero, and like I want to help my kids. And this was a discussion we had around the table. I don't know if they're going to be into entrepreneurship like I am. Doubtful, right? I mean, it's not like it's a gene that passes down. But what I do want to pass down to them is that whatever they do, I want them to have that innate desire to be the absolute best at it, right?
Absolutely.
And if they get that, then I feel like I'm successful, and they'll be successful and they'll be happy, at least in that regard.
Yep. And then, as you know, Tucker, there is an infinite return on education. So education's key, healthcare is key. None of that affects the wealth of the child or the grandchild. Those are simply opportunity sets to keep them healthy, to keep them educated. And I really like the income trust idea, because what it does is it allows anyone at whatever level they are at to simply not only focus on hopefully their passions in terms of what they want to do, but then they get a nice little kicker beyond that from the family wealth.
I'm having a hard time with these questions because I'm sitting here thinking so much. It's like I'm thinking about what questions to ask, but I'm also thinking about my life, and you're playing your life forward. What is your thought process of being around people? What the education, because you spoke a little bit about education. What does education look like for people in higher net worth? What do you see as an education in our, country? And I don't want to get political here by any means, but what do you, because there's so many different types of education. There's self-education, there's college education,
Yep.
Hard knocks education, because you learn it by doing. What is maybe your thought process on education and teaching kids from a young age? Because we don't want to put our kid in public school. I really don't want them to go to church private school. I think there's difference there. I know there's some different types of schools that are coming out learning. I know AJ Osborne out of Idaho, that him and his wife started a school. So it's just, there's so many different, there's going to be options for people that have money at some point. What do you think on that?
Yeah. So let me tie a few thoughts together. So in 2017, my buddy Michael Cole wrote a book called More Than Money, and he talks about the 6 forms of capital. The acronym is FISHES, FISHES: financial, intellectual, social, human, emotional, and spiritual. Those are the 6 forms of capital. I believe that all of us as adults need to focus on filling up those 6 forms of capital. As children, we want to educate our kids on those 6 forms of capital or education. It's not good enough just to be financially educated if you can't hold a conversation, have 0 social skills, and are never going to get a first date, right? It doesn't work for you not to have the ability to relate, empathize, and connect with other people emotionally if you wind up becoming the biggest miser on the planet, right? Like we talked about before, if you're not building relationships, if you're not focusing on your health, you're kind of screwed. So I believe in raising kids, you got to expose them to a lot. And then to the conversation that Tucker and I were having early on in this, you have to be aware enough to recognize where they gravitate towards. So Tucker, you mentioned you have 2 children. what are the top three biggest interests of your eldest child?
Well, I'll go with the youngest one because that's an obvious, but anything with a motor. If it's a motor, he's into it.
Perfect. Right. So how great would it be for you to take him, to a boat show, for you to take him to an airplane show, for you to, take him, take him to do a Tesla tour, there's a group in Dallas, Texas called Linear Labs run by a buddy of mine named Brad Hunstable, have him take a look at some of these new, 21st century motors that they're creating. Foster an opportunity for him to learn in that space, and then let him tell you. What else are your kids into?
My daughter loves art, but she's still kind of finding her way. You know how some kids are they're not as passionate as others in terms of what their likes are.
Sure.
Which I'm learning that as well, but she's into art, but the amount that he's into motors is like, it's a 10. Her into art is like a 6, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. But celebrate their interests as if they were your own. Elliot, to you, what is your 2.5-year-old into?
I got really lucky. He loves golf. I'm a big golfer. That's a club championship win that I had right there behind
me.
There
you go.
He asked me 50 times a day to go to the golf course. Go golf now?
Really?
Go golf now? Yeah.
You got lucky. You got real lucky.
Literally, we come home one night and I came home from work and I got off the phone anyway. He's like, go golf course. It's like 5:45 and Chrissy's going to the gym. And I'm like, and she has left and I'm like, buddy, it's kind of late. And he's like, oh, I want to go to the golf course. And I sat there and in my head, I said, I've wanted this for my entire life. You know what? Let's go. I'm not saying no if you want to go to the golf course, but we'll go there. And if he gets bored, he'll just go play in the sand and we'll just stay on that hole and he'll play in the sand and let somebody go through. So I'm trying to make it fun.
I think you guys are both absolutely spot on. Embrace your kids' passions as if they were your own.
Yeah.
Right. So that's probably the soundbite and the takeaway as it relates to the kids. And then create an environment with your spouse that is warm, engaging, loving, caring, nurturing, and then let them be them.
Yeah. Yeah. I had my experience. So I have a good dad in a lot of sense, but there was one thing we had growing up was, so when I was old enough to do stuff, my sister kind of got pushed to the side a little bit. And she has had a lot of issues since then. But the thing was, if you wanted to be with dad, you would do what dad wanted to do, which whether it was go skiing or go fishing or go kayaking, dad was going to go do what dad wanted to do. And if you want to hang out, you go do it. So I inherently, I had fun going and doing those things. But now I'm playing that back in my head and saying, if Monty wants to go to a ballet, I'm going to go to a ballet and I'm going to have fun. It's going to, I don't want to do it, but in my head, I don't want it to be what I want. I don't want them to try to please me. And that's really, I think, the hard thing, because we're all selfish in so many ways. Right. But looking back, that was the one thing growing up that I think I want to try to do better at.
So, and just by the fact that you said that and are aware of it, my suspicion is your father wasn't aware of what he was doing. That was kind of his default. It wasn't a conscious thing. It wasn't, you got to play in my world. It's that this is what I'm going to do. If my son's interested, he'll find his way. The gift of what you just said is your emotional awareness is greater than what your father's was. You get to make the decision. Your decision is a selfless one, as opposed to a default unconscious selfish one. Mm-hmm. And again, right, our gift, what we want to do, we all want our children to be more successful, however we define that, than us. I want my daughter to be happier. I want her to be healthier. I want her to be more accomplished in whatever it is that she wants to go do. Our job is to provide them the access and the choice to go do that. And Tucker, to your comment a little while ago, the reason that we make our money, the reason that we build our kingdoms and our fiefdoms is so that we can provide our family, spouse, kids, choices that we never, ever had ourselves, and allow them, if they want, to go farther in whatever path their world is taking them than we ever could. And in doing so, we don't want to retard them and hamper them by limiting their ability to be constructive, positive, contributing members of society, because we retarded them with too much money and not enough common sense growing up.
I think that's really good advice. I'm curious, as we kind of shift gears here a little bit, hopefully you guys don't mind, you've had a lot of experience basically helping people that are successful become successful in other parts of their lives. I mean, that's really what Tiger 21 is.
Yeah,
That's what
you
GoBundance
got
is.
it.
What are some of the things that you guys are doing in GoBundance right now that you feel have made the biggest impact on that? Because most of the people in that group are probably within the age group that listen to this show, and they're obviously between myself and Elliot's age more than likely as well.
So we just did a conference up in Squaw Valley, and I think we had about 185 folks that showed up live in person. Then we had about another 40 or so folks that came in via a streaming service that we used. So about 225 folks, more or less, attending the conference. And we had a lot of questionnaires in the back end of it, because first one I had ever done, wanted to make sure I was more or less on point. And a few things came out in terms of where we were moving the needle. One of the quotes that I used on stage that got picked up on by a lot of them came from a pastor in Dallas, Texas, by the name of Todd Wagner. And his quote was, "No man can ever exceed the opinion of his children." That tended to hit home with a lot of the fathers that were in the room. Another thing that we did is we brought in a half dozen different charitable organizations, from dream catchers to One Life to the White House to the Jensen Project to the military charity that Rob O'Neill, the Navy SEAL credited with the kill shot on Osama bin Laden, has. We brought all of these charities in to talk about the importance of exposing the GoBundance members and their families to these different charities. And we raised somewhere between like $100,000 and $200,000 in that. We also spent a lot of time working on what's called our one sheets, which focuses, Elliot, as you well know, on the 6 pillars and what we're doing to develop ourselves outside of just the simple finances. And so what we're doing to answer your question, Tucker, what we're doing to focus on the non-financial piece are all of these things that I think have lasting value as it relates to family, as it relates to relationships, as it relates to community, as it relates to health. We've scheduled, I think, 14 or 15 trips this year, from Mexico to Australia to Napa Valley. I just came back on Saturday from the women's conference that was down in a place called Cinnamon Shores. And we're creating and curating experiences, education, and programming that's designed to bring members together, bring couples together, bring families together, and create fellowship and camaraderie and discussion and intimacy that is more than just you and your wife going out with another couple for dinner. If we can create and foster an environment where these relationships flourish. Elliot, I love how you were smiling when you were talking about AJ Osborne and him starting his own school. I didn't know that. And I've spoken to AJ probably a half dozen times. Thanks for sharing that, man, because I promise you that will be a subject of conversation the next time I talk to AJ.
Yeah.
And so the answer is, we're building this rich tapestry connecting all of these GoBundance members together. The value in this does nothing but grow exponentially as that tapestry gets thicker, bigger, and more colorful. Make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it just sounds like it helps. It's a big undertaking. I'll tell you that. That's what it sounds like. But it's really just helping a lot of people like myself and Elliot that we're so focused in a lot of ways on financial gain, right? Building our empire, building, our entrepreneurial journey, that oftentimes we forget about other things. And it just is kind of, I think that's the reoccurring theme with a lot of people that are in this entrepreneurial realm. And so it takes sometimes an organization, a group, a mastermind, being around other people to kind of nudge you, remind you, as you said, kindly kick you in the head and tell you that there's other parts of your life that you need to put effort into in order to get them to stay within, somewhat of a distance of your financial success. Otherwise, you're going to have some major issues. And that goes back to, the original point that I said in this whole thing, is that the only entrepreneurial kind of person that I had to follow in my life was my grandfather. And he broke a lot of other shit because he was completely out of balance in that regard. So to bring this full circle, I think it's an interesting.
Yeah. And Tucker, the fact that you said that tells me that you're at least self-aware enough and emotionally astute to be able to realize that's not the path you want to go down. It's not the stuff that kicks us in the ass isn't the stuff that we know about. It's the stuff we don't know about. I suspect there's not enough $1 million on this planet to cause us to ignore our children. Period. End of story. It doesn't matter. Yet we will unintentionally, unconsciously, some people will do that if not told otherwise. So we all have our issues. We all have our challenges. None of us are freaking perfect. The gift of the mastermind group GoBundance and other masterminds is they hold each other accountable. And especially with GoBundance, man, there are no taboo subjects. There are no sacred cows. There's nothing we can't talk about.
Yeah, it's as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, you talk about those guys that are on their second, third marriage, or they just want to talk to their kids. And it's like, I'm on my first marriage. Tucker's on his first marriage. We got kids. And it's like, those guys didn't go into those things planning to lose their marriage while they're building their empire. It's like, you can affect people that are in that stage of life, in their growth in that 30s and 40s of like, hopefully we can teach you to not go down this path. So you wake up one day and you say, I'm sitting in this big, beautiful house with my private jet and I'm all alone, because, yeah. And you wake up and you're like, or you're with wife number 7, like you said earlier, and still thinking the problem's them.
Yeah. So the opportunity,
that guy sounds like a hoot though, by the way.
Yeah. The opportunity and what should invoke terror in both of you is those guys that we just talked about in their 50s, 60s, and 70s were you at your age. They're no different than you are. Yeah. So the gift here, guys, is you have the path and you have the choice and you have the self-awareness and you have the community to hopefully stop you from doing stupid shit. That, especially as men, Tucker, I have zero doubt in my mind, you are a type A heat-seeking missile, my friend. And my suspicion is that your motor boy son is a lot like you. I suspect he's the spitting image of you, brother.
Somebody else just told me that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
I think I left that on a message.
So no surprise, guys. No surprise. So the choice is yours. What are you going to do about it? Right? We can all put our head down, work our ass off for 40 years, make millions of dollars, and give ourselves a big pat on the back. Or we can try to at least be aware of some of the blind spots that we each have through a community of people who we relate to, trust, and share like-minded values. Or we cannot. It sucks doing this by yourself. It just does, right? And you roll the dice on divorce. You roll the dice on all of the challenges and the issues that we talked about earlier. I don't want to roll the dice. I want to fix this card game as best I can. And I want my buddies handing me aces, kings, queens, and jacks so that I got a reasonable chance of walking away with a winning hand.
So let's take this. I want to go back, since it was kind of started this as a business show. We went middle of family, and Tucker and I wheels are turning. I feel like we had a group therapy session there on how to be good dads and husbands. So economy right now is a big conversation. Inflation, stimulus, where's the country going? Where's things going? You've ran a lot of businesses. A lot of business guys. I'd love to hear your take. I think I saw your buddies with Branson, with Richard Branson. I saw a picture of you guys on your Facebook page. What is your take on the economics of of where we're at currently and where you think it's going? And what do you think opportunities are out there for people in this world we're going into?
So I'm probably not the most educated. I definitely am not the most educated guy to respond to this, but here's what little I do know. Real estate will continue to rock in the United States. It's probably one of the best investments we can think of. I think there are better and worse places geographically across the country. I think Florida is hot right now. Being in Dallas, Texas, my home price has risen over 200%, probably within the last 8, 9, 10 years. So pretty excited about that. So, for a lot of the GoBundance members and for you guys and your listeners Multifamily is doing well. Workforce housing is doing well. I've just seen 2 investment decks on build to rent. So, I think real estate's going to continue to jam. I have a friend of mine, David Bailey, who's probably one of the top 10 most knowledgeable people on Bitcoin in the world. I'm not joking. He actually is the host for the largest Bitcoin conference in the world that's being hosted in Miami the 3rd through the 5th of June. He's convinced Bitcoin's going to break not only 100, but probably 150,000. So a doubling this year. I have every confidence that'll happen based on what he shared. So that's good. Oil and gas is a crapshoot because there's so many things that play into it. I'm invested in 2 or 3 early stage technology companies. I'm invested in mineral rights. I'm invested with Marriott in hotels. Everything right now is pretty stable as they go. I'm moving away from any new private equity investments. I'm actually keeping a fair amount of cash on hand right now. And then I have had 2 friends do a hard sell on asking me if I'd be interested in moving to Puerto Rico. As you may know, in Puerto Rico, federal income is 4%. Capital gains is 0 as long as you spend 183 days down there.
So down there, I always hear him talking about Peter Schiff.
Yeah. So I have had no less than about a half dozen of my buddies, some of which were in Tiger 21, all bounced down to Puerto Rico. There's a place called Dorado Beach, which is a big Ritz-Carlton resort. There's the Plantation, the Venetian. There are a few folks and few developments that are down there that are absolutely booming right now. So I don't know if I answered anything with any level of detail. That was a pretty whitewash answer, Elliot, but it's what I know.
No, I think it's great. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer there. It's just kind of your thought. Are you concerned with sitting on a bunch of cash right now?
Not really. I'm headed to this Bitcoin conference at the Miami Convention Center in June. I already have with my brother about 60,000 that we placed it into Bitcoin back in early 2018. So may double down on that. One of the things I think I'm going to do is pay off the rest of my mortgage this year, so that like Tucker, I can own my house free and clear. But no, I'm actually pretty happy with where things are right now, and economically, I think, as is always the case, the rich, regardless of tax reform, regardless of the silly wealth tax that they're talking about in California, the rich know how to stay rich. And I'm not the level of rich that my Tiger 21 folks are, but I listen well, I take direction, and I will follow in their stead all day long.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. It's probably the wildest time in my 20-year career here in real estate. And I rode up the last boom, rode out the last bust, built the company I have now on the heels of the last bust. So with all of that in the rear view, this is the craziest time I've ever been in, without question.
Nothing's really making sense. Our debt is so insane. It's not even funny. So I don't have any hard advice beyond what I've already shared. Candidly, I'm kind of putting my head down. I'm going to work my ass off for the next few years. I run a multifamily office in addition to the work I do with GoBundance. They have some interesting investment deals that I may jump in on, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna draft behind some really rich and smart people and see if I can't jump onto their investments and get lucky behind them.
Yeah, I agree. That's the thing is, I think biggest fear I have and why I'm pushing so hard right now, and that's where the balance is hard, is last year when this COVID hit, I'm like, dude, inflation's going to be nuts. And so we started buying a ton of assets and added 36 doors, and we're buying another 25 unit right now. We're building a 13 unit plus going after more development. And I'm looking like a friggin' genius right now with what I bought and where we're at currently.
Good for you.
And I think it's only going to get worse. I think you just got to bob and weave on the regulations between states and states. But yeah, I think buckle up. I think it's going to be a wild I think it's going to be a wild decade, honestly.
Good. So Elliot, when are you thinking about joining Champions? I'm going somewhere with this. What are your thoughts, brother?
Well, my goal would be this year, but I gotta increase my net worth a little bit.
How far are you off?
7. I'm at the 7 mil off because I have to hit 10, right?
No, it's 5 right now.
Oh shit! I'll lend you $2 million. You're in.
Shit,
Well,
depending on how you value the call center, I could or could not be there right now, depending on.
I was looking at numbers. We flirted it out there.
I can get 2 on that. Somewhere in there, I'm there. I'm pretty close.
Yeah, here's why I ask Elliot. A few things. Number one, come August 1st, my non-compete expires with Tiger 21, and I'm going to raise the 5 to 10. That's happening this year. Everyone who $1 million for requirements for joining GoBundance Champions.
Yep.
Before August 1st, it's 5 million. Everybody's grandfathered in. That's thought number one. Thought number two, we have a retreat out of Lake Onassee, which is about 75 miles west of Atlanta in Georgia. It's the 16th through the 18th of June. We'll have 60 GoBundance champions there. If you decide to join GoBundance and are interested in making that event, happy to dial you in.
What's the difference between? I don't have to. It's a level. I've already paid. I'm already in GoBundance, but is this another level? Is it more? It's just a different group of guys. Basically, you're still in the main one.
You're still in the main one, but it's so. As an example, I am friends with Richard Branson, and next year we're going to do a retreat on Branson's Island called Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands. Oh, yeah. So we'll have 20 GoBundance champions and their wives on Necker Island. I'm doing it this year. Some of the names that are coming, I can't speak to, but they're people that you would readily know. And every year I bring a group of luminaries. This year we're doing it on health, wellness, and psychedelics. We're also going to do a trip probably in the fall of 2022 to Africa. And we're going to hit Cape Town, Mount Rochelle, Ulasaba, and Johannesburg. And these are going to be champion-specific activities. We also have a gauntlet where think Shark Tank. We get 3 investment opportunities. We present them, we pre-vet them. We present them to the champions, and they get to invest with as little as $10,000 or $25,000. Nice. So there's just more involved. We're doing this retreat at Lake Onassee. I have a number of speakers coming in. It'll be 2 days of masterminding. We're also going to an Atlanta Braves St. Louis Cardinals game. We're doing a evening out on the water with wakeboard boats, ski boats, and pontoon boats. And then we have a group called DLP out of St. Augustine, Florida, led by a guy named Don Wenner. They have about $5 billion under management right now. They're going to be hosting our dinner on Wednesday night.
Funny story. You talk about psychedelics. I'm actually on the tail end of tapering off my Lexapro because I'm going to Austin to go do medically supervised MDMA. Potentially, allegedly thought process. I've thought about it, maybe somewhere, maybe doing it. But
we're going to do some psilocybin on Necker Island this year. No shit.
Yeah, I've looked at that. I mean, the research out of that stuff is amazing. I'm really hoping because I've been on antidepressants and anxiety medicines for the last decade, and I was in rehab at 21. Struggled a lot with depression, suicide, a lot of different things, and so I'm interested because I have a lot of things that I would like to bring back up from my past that I can't think of, and I think that psychedelics is really, really amazing for those things. So.
Yeah, we're having multiple guided experiences on Necker. We chose to keep it light to mushroom psilocybin.
Why not ayahuasca?
So it's just too long of a trip. And if we did ayahuasca, I would do it with a group called Eurythmia in Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. It's guided shaman experiences, and I'm told that's the best. Yeah.
Our good mutual friend does that all the time. He actually just sent me one that they have one up in my neck of the woods with the shaman, but we have to get more into that next time. So I don't know, maybe I can get Tucker to join the champions with me. I think he's there and we can go do it.
I've done a lot of unguided trips with what you guys are talking about. So, but kidding aside,
Tucker, thought for you, brother. So at this event, the 16th through the 18th of June, in Lake Onassee, Georgia, we'll have 60 to 70 GoBundance champions. Of course, you're welcome to join GoBundance. That's fine. If, however, you want to check this out first, make sure it fits, make sure it's a cultural match, make sure it's something your wife could get behind, your kids could participate in, everything that Ellie and I have spoken about. I'd show up. I'd spend 2 days, cost you, $2,000 or whatever the charge for the room and everything else is, and then make a decision. You're more than welcome to attend that as my guest if you want, and then decide, or you're welcome to join or not join. Whatever you want to do, I'm cool with.
Well, I appreciate that offer. I will definitely consider that strongly. But that's awesome.
All right, guys, I got another Zoom call that started 2 minutes ago. Anything else for me?
Chris, thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find out more about you really quick?
So best place to go is the GoBundance website. It's www.gobundance.com. My name is Chris Ryan. My email is chris.ryan@gobundance.com. You're welcome to reach out to me, and I'll do whatever I can to help.
Thanks, Chris. That was a great
Thanks,
show.
guys. Appreciate you both. Bye-bye.